Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar on Mindfulness and Performance. My name is Sarah Speltz, and I'm an Associate Director in the BU Alumni Relations Office. Today's webinar is sponsored by the Boston University Alumni Association and is offered as part of our alumni educational programming. We have a few poll questions up on the screen right now, so if you want to just take a second to answer those questions, we'll do a few announcements and we'll get started. We hold a lot of our educational programs on campus, but we do offer webinars because we want to connect with our alumni around the globe. And we have alumni joining us today from France and Great Britain, as well as from many places in the U.S., including Arkansas, California, Florida, Georgia, Kansas, Maine, my home state of Minnesota, Missouri, North and South Carolina, New Hampshire, Ohio, Wisconsin, and of course, New England and Massachusetts. Before I introduce today's speaker, we have some brief housekeeping notes. The webinar is being hosted on the Adobe Connect online meeting platform. If you experience any trouble with the audio or visual portions of this presentation, please contact Adobe Connect at 1-800-422-3623. And that number is on the screen right now. You may want to just jot that down because I'm going to be taking that slide away. Today's presentation is being recorded and will soon be available on the BU Alumni website. It is www.bu.edu/alumni. I will also send you an email when that recording is up. Our speaker today is eager to answer your questions, and you're welcome to submit them anytime throughout the presentation using the Q&A box you see below the slide. And I'm going to take these poll questions down here. But thank you all for answering these. And then we will introduce our speaker. It is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Amy Baltzell. Amy is a clinical associate professor in the School of Education and the coordinator of the sport psychology within the counseling program. She is also the president of the Association of Applied Sports Psychology. She has been involved in sport at all levels, including Olympic level rowing and professional sailing. Now, as a licensed counseling psychologist and practicing sports psychologist, she provides educational workshops and runs a private practice. Her areas of interest are in performance enhancement, positive psychology, and mindfulness. In this webinar, Amy will offer us a core understanding of mindfulness, some ways to cultivate a mindful approach to performance, and offer some case studies about the power of the mindful approach in performance. In the future, look out for her book, The Power of Mindfulness, due out soon. Amy, thanks so much for being with us today. I'm going to switch to your slide deck, but go ahead, the floor is yours.
All right, Sarah, thank you so much, and it has been really such an honor to be invited to do this, and incredible to see kind of the range of interest of alumni and that are interested in hearing about mindfulness and performance. And so I really see this as like really just like a delightful, joyful moment in my career to be able to share some of the things that are so deep and important to me that I share with my students in my field. And it's exciting to see. I notice that most people that are joining here are not identified as sports psych practitioners, and to me that's pretty exciting to see people outside my field interested in what we have to offer. So here we go. The first thing I thought I would share with you all is maybe what I'm most grateful for. I know that for me to be with you here today, it took a lot of people and a lot of connections and a lot of opportunity for me to be able to learn what I've learned and be able to share what I share. And so first of all, I'd like to thank John Kabat-Zinn, who really has been the leader in the Western world of bringing mindfulness to practitioners. And he was the first person to study mindfulness in sport in 1985. He just briefly there, and he moved into helping people, general population with stress. Josh Summers, I didn't really know much about mindfulness until I invited him into a class of mine. He's a mindfulness meditation teacher, acupuncturist in the Boston area. Now he really has become my teacher, colleague, and co-author of my new book. George Mumford, if you hadn't read his book, it's fantastic. He also has been he's Boston-based. He did work with John Kabat-Zinn in the 80s in the prisons, and he has been involved in mindfulness and sport for the last 30 years, a lot in pro sport. Frank Gardner, Zella Moore have inspired me in terms of their academic work. Um, they have their book, The Mac Approach, is dense, but very really inspired my own work. My research team, I've got doc students who have been just incredible for the last 4 or 5 years, helping me develop mindful meditation training and sports intervention I've been working on. Trevor Cote is studying it. Bob Deal has been incredible support the last many years. Rob D has been studying it as well. Chelsea Bowman. So thank you guys and women for your help. Laura Baltzell, certainly my sister, has gotten me into mindfulness in the beginning, and maybe not last but not least, maybe most, Boston University. Thank you for letting me do what I believe is important. It's really such an incredible opportunity to be able to do what I'm doing now. So who are you? So I was thinking, who am I sharing these ideas with? And I know that 30% of you all listening are BU alumni, people also in the business, the arts, graduates, last many decades at Boston University. So it's really exciting to come together on this topic. Some of you in the beginning, I noticed some people have had a meditation practice, some haven't, and so I'm hoping to inspire those who are practitioners to continue to practice, deepen your practice, and maybe others to either engage in a meditation practice or just it's a big just, even bring a bit of mindfulness of what it really means into our lives can have a huge impact for ourselves, and it can ripple out to everyone we are, everyone in our lives. So here's my outline for today. I want to talk about what is mindfulness, a little bit first about my background in mindfulness, the benefits of it, the role of self-compassion in mindfulness, and perhaps maybe you're all most interested in how to cultivate mindfulness in your lives. And then I'll close with a little bit about the intervention that I've been working on for the last, 6 or 7, 8 years. I'm bringing mindfulness practices to sport in an efficient, impactful way. So my own background in mindfulness, I've been involved now last 8 years, practicing some days none, and some days 30 minutes, 60 minutes, 90 minutes. It depends on the day. And I have been blessed by having the opportunity to get training, in meditation. The MBSR is John Kabat-Zinn's development over the last 25, 30 years, and I did his 5-day training. Kristen Neff and Chris Germer have a mindful self-compassion training. I've done that in the teacher training. It's really fantastic exploration into integration of mindfulness and self-compassion. I've done retreats with Jack Kornfield, Tara Brock. Most recently, last few years, involved in Reiki mastership training, which is also mindfulness-based practice. So what is mindfulness? I know many years ago, I think when I first was exposed to the idea, we think of being mindful as being, at ease, calm, peaceful, accepting. And that's part of it. But being mindful really is being able to be present to our entire human experience. And sometimes that's calm and at ease. And I don't know if you're a human like me. Sometimes it's also includes distress, anger, frustration, irritation, impatience, disappointment, sadness, loneliness, And the idea of mindfulness, again, broadly is, can we be in contact with all that it is to be human in a way that we can live, a better quality of life. And the big idea is that mindfulness is being able to hold all that occurs in a way that we can, stay in touch with it and maybe learn how to respond wisely to whatever is showing up instead of kind of shut it down, pretend it's not there, drink it away, cut it away, drug it away, all that. And instead, maybe just really noticing what's arising. And I think the genius of mindfulness is we're less maybe reactive, less reactive emotionally, and we have much wider choice in how to respond. So John Kabat-Zinn's classic definition, paying attention on purpose in the present moment, non-judgmentally. And I just want to take a little bit of time to think about this because it's this intention of being present to really what's arising. And the non-judgment doesn't mean that we don't judge. It's really about being able to um, notice anything that's arising, but again, joy, ease, frustration, irritation, anger, and being able to accept it, being able to tolerate it, being able to have it be okay that it's arising, and not like shying away from it, and not pretending it's not there, and not, you know, just putting ourselves into fantasy or into being numb. Just it's being willing to be present to what really ever is arising, and then in that moment of acceptance, of maybe not judging even our judgment, we have lots more choices of how to respond. And the one story that always comes to mind when I think about this is when I first got introduced to mindfulness 10 years ago. At the time, I had a 2, 4, and 6 year old. And I remember being, kind of, a young professor and overwhelmed and I really wanted to get my kids in the car. And I was kind of angry and irritated because they weren't doing what I wanted them to do. And, um, and I remember recalling in the haze of this frustration, this idea of mindfulness I'd been recently bumping into, and remembering that it's about pausing and accepting whatever's arising. And in that moment, if you're able to do that, maybe you can choose to act or respond differently. So in that moment, I paused. I was like, after I said to my kids, "Come on, get in the car, let's go," and they were resisting. I was frustrated, and then in that moment, instead of like raising my voice again, I just paused and looked at them and allowed the irritation and frustration to well up through me, and just waited to see what maybe the wise thing to say would be in that state of acceptance and non-judgment of my own frustration. And what arose in that moment was very kind of eked out, like, "Can you guys please get in the car?" I'll never forget my 6 year old at the time, now 16, looked up in at my eyes and said, "Mom, if you just talk to us like that, we'd be much more likely to do what you want us to do." And they just kind of like in a little line just got in the car quietly. And I thought to myself, wow, like if I can change my relationship to my feelings, if I can able to be present to them, intentionally aware of them, and accept whatever's arising, particularly that which is unsavory, and I can learn how to choose how to respond differently, life might really be different. And it has been. The last 10 years has been very different, and I'm so grateful to these ideas. So Ellen Langer, I'd be remiss not to mention Ellen Langer's concept of mindfulness. And she talks much more about how we are engaged in our environment around us. She does not use meditation, but her idea is about really being willing to really notice what really is showing up instead of pretending it's what it was in the past or believing things are as they were. It's like, no, actually, what really is showing up right now? It could be that sister who you had a really difficult time with is actually a really nice person. Or it could be that job you thought was really frustrating. It could be like, wow, this is actually really fascinating and interesting. And so with Ellen Langer, she's taking this idea of present moment, and it's almost like building on this idea. Once you can accept what's arising, you actually might be able to lean into it and be quite curious about what is novel and new about what is arising in your awareness. In 2016, I wrote an edited book, and in that book, Josh Summers and I wrote the final chapter, and we were really grappling with this definition of mindfulness. And so we talk about it as this. You see the definition here. Mindfulness is a quality of awareness that objectifies the contents of experience. We're able to see it clearly. It's not through the veil of what used to be or how it used to be or how it was or your activity. It's just you're able to see what's really arising, both what's happening within yourself and an external environment. And we're able to kind of see it for what it is. It can promote this greater sense of tolerance and maybe even interest toward this content that becomes more clear. Okay, so there's mindfulness. So very theoretical, conceptual, but these ideas really help us in these practical moments, and I'll get to that. So I spoke about this a little bit with my example with the kids, but this idea of, when you're mindful, what it really does, when you're able to be kind of like really notice what's happening, you're able to, instead of react, you're able to choose how you want to respond. And I feel like there's a space, and this idea, the space between stimulus and response, not my idea. It's not a new idea. Some people have attributed it to Viktor Frankl. This idea, this space between stimulus and response. And in this space, instead of just reacting, if we're able to notice what's arising, self-criticism, embarrassment, fear, even like automatic responses, or if we're able to bring awareness to what's arising and notice like, well, normally I respond in this way, I react in this way. If it works, great, go. And sometimes, how we are reacting isn't really ideal for now. It might have worked 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, but it really might not work so well now. And so it's like, well, this is what I'm experiencing. And for right now, in this moment, what do I want to choose? And one way to think about it is choosing to align, you know, um, our actions, what we choose to do, say, that are aligned with what we value now versus what we might have valued in the past. And I know this is conceptual, but I've had experience where over the last many years where I'll notice this, it almost feels like there is like this magical space. Something happens and I'm aware of it. There's kind of this awareness, this metacognitive experience. And I'll notice almost like what normally I would do in the situation. And all of a sudden I'm freed up in that noticing, choose different. So that's why when I think about this work, why this is so important, I think of all the students I work with and the athletes who I work with, the musicians, people who are putting their hearts and souls 20, 30 hours a week of training into something. And oftentimes their performance after all the training, all the preparation, it's impacted by reactions of how they to emotions that arise. And when I can help them free up, you don't have to feel a certain way. You don't have to, it doesn't really matter what uninvited thoughts and feelings arise. Fear, anxiety, embarrassment, frustration, feeling flat, it doesn't matter. You still can choose to respond and behave in the way that you value. And that's been wildly freeing, for the people I work with. So in summary, Bishop and colleagues offer this, I think, a really nice way of understanding mindfulness. First, it's this regulation of attention. So you're choosing where you want to put your attention. And for a meditation practice, is in the present moment. And there's this orientation of adopting a way of how you're maybe holding the present moment. And they talk about it's characterized by the sense of curiosity, openness, acceptance. Beautiful. So benefits of mindfulness training. There's so much research on this. There are, I think maybe it was like about a year and a half ago, the count was 8,000 or 9,000 studies that I'm sure that's still mushrooming. There was a wonderful meta-analysis that Keng did, which was reviewing much of the meditation research at that time. Up to that point, looking at the kind of quantifiable benefits of meditation practice. Much of the research Keng looked at was based on Jon Kabat-Zinn's mindfulness-based stress reduction program. And this was research both of people's clinical issues, depression, anxiety, fear, non-clinical issues, and found that there's just been an amazing amount of positive impact from change of positive, improvement of positive emotion, improved sense of spirituality, empathy, understanding and feeling what the other feels, sense of connection, mindfulness, it makes sense, ability to forgive. We know if you can't forgive, how that can be so corrosive, amazing. Helps compassion towards self, satisfaction with life, quality of life. And the list, really, it's like a laundry list. It's a scroll of benefits from meditation practice. The challenge, of course, is that it takes effort and commitment to be willing to practice. This is based on Jon Kabat-Zinn's intervention, where people are practicing half an hour to 45 minutes daily. And so it's actually quite a bit of meditation practice for those who haven't tried. But there's plenty of data more recently where there's really great benefits are found from mindfulness practices that are more brief than that. So we're still looking at quantity and dosage of practice. So how does mindfulness practice help? It helps with attention regulation. So if you're staying kind of hooked into the present moment, you're less likely to get wrapped up in what already happened with regret or fear of the future. It also helps with emotion regulation. So like my example with the kids, when I was able to tolerate like here's this frustration, anger arising, and I didn't feed it with, didn't throw gas on the flame. I was able to accept that that's what was arising, and then trying to, you know, work with it. And so by accepting what's occurring versus fighting it or wishing it to be different, the data shows that it can help increase positive emotion and reduce negative emotion. And the third way, and again, there's many mechanisms of change, but this is three of the big ones. It also helps you decenter. That means like not be so fused with those uninvited thoughts and feelings that are so unhelpful. The thoughts of like, I'm not good enough, I'm not pretty enough, I'm not strong enough, I'm not fit enough, I'm not young enough, I'm not old enough, I'm not whatever it is enough, and how these thoughts that whatever thought is most difficult for you know, we all have them, maybe one or two special ones that come back at us often. We can notice it. There it is. That thought again. There it is. There it is. It's okay. It's there. And even though that thought is I'm not good enough or strong enough or smart enough or able enough or competent enough or social enough or, whatever, I can't throw a good party enough. That's one of mine. Okay, there it is. Okay. And so you still can choose how to respond to those uninvited thoughts and feelings. They don't have to rule us. And that's one thing that, but whether it's meditation practice or just the understanding that these uninvited thoughts and feelings that arise, that we don't have to be victim to them. We don't have to believe them. We don't have to buy into them. We can notice what they are and then choose like, okay, there's some credibility to that thought, or this is not helpful. I'm going to choose to shift my attention. So ways to cultivate mindfulness. Oh boy, there's a lot to do here. I wanted to start with offering this first one, the first bullet. I'll come back to this list. One clear way is to practice meditation. And I've noticed that about half of you that logged in earlier said that half have tried it, half haven't tried it. There's lots of ways to practice. I'm going to show you, and we're going to do a little practice together in a moment. But also know that, sitting formal meditation practice is not the only way to do. There's also things like mindful eating, mindful walking. I know probably one of the most impactful experiences I had, I was at a meditation retreat and we were invited after our morning meditation to go have breakfast and eat mindfully. And I thought, oh God, I don't want to do that, But I was waiting for the omelets and the line was long. So I thought I'd just go get a little fruit and a little yogurt and then I'll wait for my omelet that looks so delicious. And I remembered the cue, eat mindfully. And I thought, oh gosh, okay. So I took a moment to be grateful for the food and where it came from and who created it and who gardened it and transported it, etc. And I took one bite at a time and really noticed how it tasted. And then pretty soon into that experience, I started finding myself really, frustrated because I noticed that not only did I notice how nice the food tasted, I also noticed that I was getting full. And the line to the omelet line was dwindling. And I realized like, oh my gosh, I had to actually be honest and aware of what I was experiencing, which included satisfaction and fullness. And it was time to stop eating. And so I opted not to go to that omelet line. And it was, sometimes, though it sounds great, the mindful eating helped me not overeat that morning. Sometimes when we're become mindful of what's really occurring, even if it's to our benefit, sometimes it's hard to accept because Zach, that happened to me about 3 years ago, and since that day, overeating has not been a source of satisfaction for me. So I had to find other ways. So being mindful, it's really it's about being honest, really honest with what's arising, and then working with it in a different way. So, but it still can be it can be challenging. So what I want to do is share with you, which I learned from Josh Summers, and actually Rob D, one of my doc students, put this image together. So thank you, Rob D. But it came from Josh Summers, and this is the idea of the meditation cycle. And so I want to invite you all to try this, and people who have meditated with just a 2-minute breath meditation. For others, it might be new. And so with the meditation cycle, before we go, I'd like to just describe what happens in a meditation practice. I like to note that every component on this meditation process is part of meditating. Some people think meditating is only when your attention's on the thing you're supposed to attend to, like this is your breath. But the truth is, meditation includes mind wandering. Meditation includes noticing your mind wandering. Meditation includes, can relax. You notice the mind's wandering. Return to the meditation. So let's try it. We'll just do, given the time we have, even just 60 seconds. And so you all are, hopefully you're in a comfortable position wherever you are, sitting at your desk or chair or walking along the street. I don't know. Invite you to, if you're in a, sitting or sedentary position, invite you to soften your gaze or close your eyes. I'm going to invite you to bring your attention to the sensation of breathing. It might be tingling on the tip of your nose. It might be feeling a sensation of pressure in your shoulders. Breathe in and breathe out. Breathing at your own pace, keeping your primary breath. Wanders. Notice it. Gently bring your attention to the breath. And that noticing, allow your body to relax just a little bit before you bring your attention back. So let's begin. Pace that is comfortable for you. Relax. Those minds are quiet. Just noticing, kind of gently. So I wish we had an hour for that. We don't. So thanks for trying that. And if your mind was focused, your attention was focused only on your breath the whole time, that's good. If you notice your mind wandering like 23 times, that's good. You know? And when you mind wander, to be able to notice it and relax, beautiful. It's a practice of poise, and bringing your attention back to where you choose to place your attention. That's a beautiful aspect of meditation training. It's not just being good at meditating. It's being able to develop control over where you choose to place your attention. It's a beautiful practice in that. So that's one way to practice meditation. There's many resources on the web, etc., in terms of wonderful meditation centers across the country to learn that practice if you are interested. If you're interested, I encourage you to give it a shot. The one thing I want to add to this is this idea that, it's not just about an awareness. It's also this bringing kind of a sense of kindness and compassion to yourself when you're practicing. Jon Kabat-Zinn, it's interesting, this isn't usually emphasized with the researchers, but this is what Kabat-Zinn, who's brought mindfulness to us, writes, that when you're suffering, that this meditation practice can be quite helpful. And that it's because the practice is cultivating various aspects of mind and heart, he writes, via the faculty of mindful attention. And he said the words for mind and heart are the same in Asian languages. Thus, mindfulness includes an affectionate, compassionate quality within the attending, a sense of open-heartedness, friendly presence, and interest. And so I beg of you, implore you, if you consider your own meditation practice, if you're a practitioner, if you're just maybe beginning, you can consider it, or just beginning to consider being aware of your moment-to-moment experience. If you could bring a sense of open-heartedness and friendliness, interest, kindness to your own experience, what may be a shift in your experience it might be. So when I think of mindfulness, I think of self-compassion closely aligned with it because people suffer. We all suffer. And I think of self-compassion. This comes from Kristen Neff and Chris Germer. I cite them in the next slide or two. They talk about when you're suffering, the idea that it's actually this kind of radical act of kindness to others, to give kindness to yourself, because if you are able to offer yourself kindness when you're suffering, you don't have to rely on everyone else around you to do it for you. It's a big idea. So when you're suffering, to be able to offer yourself, be aware of your own suffering. Understand that you're not the only one who suffers. Others suffer too. And I know that I know for myself, when I go through something, it often feels it's just me. And when I have to remind myself, no, it's me and probably a million other people feeling similarly, you know. And then with this awareness of our own suffering and with this understanding we're not alone, being able to intentionally offer ourselves what we most need in terms of it's a phrase, an image, a behavior. We need to take time off. We need to get more engaged. Whatever it is, knowing what we need to do for ourselves that will allow ourselves to have the courage and face what we must face. And so I think of self-compassion not as something that makes you weak, not as something that, but it's something that allows you to have the courage instead of disconnecting, instead of getting lost in the rumination of what happened, instead of getting lost in like fantasies or fears of what might show up. You're able to stay present in the moment and have the courage to face really what's right in front of you. And when I think of self-compassion, another thing so when you're suffering, you suffer, we all suffer sometimes, can you, self-compassion practice is bringing some warmth, some kindness to yourself. And then you can, though you might feel like the cat, you can be that lion. You can be courageous, in facing. And for me, little kids freaking out in that moment, bringing just a little kindness in that moment so I could, withstand it, to be more what I really want to be, courageous mother for the children. So when I think about ways of cultivating mindfulness, we've talked about meditation practice a little bit, this idea of being willing to choose between what's arising in our response to that. And it's a willingness to stay with the uncomfortable and willingness to learn to choose in that moment. I mentioned mindful eating. You can do mindful walking. You can mindfully wash your dishes. You can have mindful conversations. You can bring mindfulness to all aspects of this human experience. And then when we're suffering, I think of bringing mindfulness to a particular aspect, which is to our own suffering, and being able to ask yourself, how do I really right now? And I just had a nice, beautiful conversation with George Mumford last week on his, it was like a live streaming on his website. And this is a phrase he used. I thought this was beautiful. What do I need to do to nudge myself back into the eye of the hurricane? So if your life is like a hurricane, there's that center of kind of like calmness, steadiness, poise. And so what is it that you need to be able to put yourself back in the center of your hurricane, so you can make the most wise choices. And there's plenty of programs in terms of mindfulness training programs. I just mentioned here MBSR, Mindful-Based Stress Reduction, that John Kabat-Zinn has developed, is certainly a fantastic program. There's many other programs. I only mentioned mine because I want to share with you just briefly what I have been up to in my research. And how my intervention is geared, it's bringing kind of the best, I think, of both mindfulness and self-compassion together to help athletes develop their ability to attend to what they choose to attend to. So that means like the tennis player, someone calls out and they should be focused on, the next play instead of like feeling overwhelmed and ready to throw the racket on the ground and throw a fit, they can notice that urge and they can, accept that urge of, wanting to hurl the racket and choose to bring their attention back to the court. And when athletes are able to do this, they're able to be more present and adjust to what's occurring in the moment that's relevant to performance. And this is a beautiful metaphor for all of us in terms of, where do we want to place our attention? When we get thrown off by potentially thrown off by difficult thoughts and emotions, how are we going to change our relationship to those so we can bring our attention back and be able to adapt and adjust moment to moment, make the wisest choices to live our lives to our fullest, So this intervention, I mentioned very briefly, We have had a number of studies with this intervention. Um, it's a 6-week program. It's basically 6 hours, a 6-hour program, and it's broken up to 10 minutes of education, 10 minutes of practice, and then 10 minutes of discussion. Here, you're welcome to take a look at this later on. I just want to give you a sense of the type of practices that this is from Josh Summers started this intervention, and I have updated it by bringing some self-compassion practices throughout the intervention. If you're interested in this, I'm happy to answer any questions in the Q&A, and also know that the book, The Power of Mindfulness, is coming out in February, which offers a very detailed explanation of the intervention and all the ideas that go along with the intervention. But what might be different than maybe typical meditation interventions is there's an intention here, you say in module 1, where we're practicing from the very beginning, bringing, kindness, kind awareness to our breathing. And in module 2, thinking about when thoughts are arising, the meditation practice, learning how to bring kindness, kind awareness to that crazy monkey mind that can happen to many of us. Our minds can start racing. How can we label that and notice that in a way that, it's okay. It's okay just like it is. Module 4, we have a practice where we're purposely bringing back a memory that's quite difficult, and maybe one that we spun out on and didn't do well on, and thinking about in that moment, back then, what I most need to hear, what could I have offered to myself in that moment, and through a visualization practice, having the participants in the program bring that kind of self. Module 5, we have the participants do a practice where they do a walking meditation, and the attention is on the soles of their feet as they're walking. And this is a really traditional practice to help people who are really overwhelmed and in kind of excessive distress experience, to help ground them and get them back, literally ground them into the present moment focus. And I know that with our interventions that the tennis athletes in particular love this, because they could take this walking practice meditation and take it right onto the tennis court and practice and in performance to help them ground them, get focused back on what they value, what was important to them. Very briefly, the intervention, this is a study that we did last year. It was 15 Olympic athletes on badminton, 13 collegiate golf players, and I think it was 17 tennis players, and 43 total. And this is just a little bit of data on the intervention. We've got the studies coming out the next few months, we hope. Research team, here we go. The meditation, 6 hours of this. These are competitive collegiate athletes and Olympic athletes, had a significant increase in mindfulness through this 6 1-hour intervention. Also, the badminton athletes and the collegiate golf players had an increase in self-compassion. Statistically, at the 0.01 level, so there was a big jump, and we have great confidence in that the program was able to not only increase mindfulness, but also self-compassion for the athletes. So when I think about mindfulness and self-compassion for you, here's maybe a list of questions that might be helpful to you to think about for yourself as you try to take some of these ideas from this brief webinar to your life. And maybe right now in your mind, like, what mindfulness practice might you be willing to try? Is it maybe a walking meditation? I know so many people who are more like physically focused. It's a little bit easier sometimes to start with that. Is it bringing mindfulness into your eating? I know from experience that was wildly challenging and incredibly helpful to my health. Or is it a formal meditation practice? In terms of self-compassion, is there a moment recently where you may have reacted in a way that you didn't like? Probably all of us. But often we have these moments where we react in ways we don't like, and it's kind of embarrassing. We just want to forget about it. But instead, maybe consider how you could have been more accepting whatever was arising inside you, frustration, irritation, and maybe how you could have responded in a more wise way. Maybe you could have been more courageous to speak up, or maybe courageous to stay still and not share your anger or frustration, and it's not, this kind of reflection isn't to be, painful, but it's about thinking, if I can think about how I could have done it differently, then maybe I can have some insight into how I'd like to choose to respond to difficulty in the future instead of just react the way I was reacting. And then, when you've been most hard on yourself, you might think of a recent moment when you were, maybe pushing yourself, and maybe things didn't turn out the way you wanted it to, and it felt painful. You might ask yourself, like, what did I most need to hear in that moment? And as you bring up that memory, you might imagine what word or image could I bring up that might be soothing. Like it could be the thought, and this comes from Paul Gilbert's work, Compassion Focused Therapy. It's not my fault I feel like this. You know? Or maybe like others suffer too. Or I just did the best I could. This prompt, what do you most need to hear? That came from Chris Germer and Kristen Neff's Mindfulness Self-Compassion Teacher Training course. And so maybe big picture, maybe as we're kind of steaming on life, but there's these moments where we know there's kind of this moment that I need to kind of just wake up. You know, it's like, can I pause? Can I notice with kindness? And can I choose how I want to respond here? You know, can I choose how I respond? I was just working with a professional musician yesterday, and she's getting ready to go for a tryout for like a main city, like a big orchestra. And you know, that thought of making mistakes, and when the mistakes arise, her instinct is just to stop playing. You know, that's problematic. No matter how good you are, you know, probably as a musician, and probably as a human being, we're going to make mistakes. And in that moment, we really worked with how she could, you know, notice what was awry, like just play along beautifully, notice when that mistake arose, uh, and notice her reaction to it, and being willing to choose to stay engaged with creating the music instead of stopping. Imagine if it's almost like a metaphor for our lives. Can we stay engaged with the music of our lives instead of stopping and berating and shutting ourselves down, you know, because of it's not perfect, not perfect. So takeaways I hope you take with you for this, and then we'll get to Q&A. Maybe try meditating, you know, maybe just briefly, maybe 5 minutes. I know I do a class in the summer, and we start with the students practicing 5 minutes a day. And they've had kind of amazing impact on their experience. And remember that when meditation cycle, it's focusing on whatever you meditate on, whether it's eating or walking or breathing, or noticing thoughts or noticing sounds or noticing all of it. And part of meditating is also the mind wandering. Part of meditating is also noticing the mind wandering, and maybe even noticing that the pain that arises with the frustration of mind wandering, you know. Accepting is part of the meditation cycle. Refocusing is part of the meditation cycle. All of it is meditating. It's not like you're just meditating for 2 minutes, the rest of the time is wasted. No, in that 10-minute practice, if all of this is happening, it's all part of the meditation practice. Okay. Another thing maybe I hope you take from this is that there's a space between stimulus and response. And you don't have to meditate to notice this. You know, just living our lives, we can choose how we want to respond versus just habitually responding the way we've always responded. You know, we are much more free. We're much more free than most of us imagine. You know, and I encourage you, maybe this is inspired by the Reiki training, but set your intention for today. Maybe just for today, no fear. Maybe just for today, no regret. Maybe for today, being willing to stay present and grateful, you know, for all that's arising, not just that which is perfect, and not just that which goes the way you want it to go, but maybe all of it. I put this list of books. The one I want to share with you all is the Power of Mindfulness, coming out in February, which is based really on all my current work. The Mindfulness and Performance I did, that was the edited book from last year, my first book, The Sweet Spot. I have listed there, and it has some other suggested reading, which has very much influenced my own thinking. And I've used many of these. Actually, I've used all of these in classes I've taught. And so now, time for questions.
Amy, thank you so much. That was great. And we have this Q&A box at the bottom of the screen, which you can use, all of you here, to type in some questions. And I'm just going to make the Q&A box a little bigger. All right, we have a question from Shamima. Hi, Amy. Do you marry up mindfulness and religion? Have you ever worked with Muslims who practice prayer, form of meditation? Here, their attention is fixed on the center of the prayer mat or in standing position, etc.
So, Shams, thank you for your question. I have never worked with mindfulness and religion, and so that's definitely outside of my area of knowledge or expertise. So it's a short answer.
Great. And as we're waiting for people to send in their questions, and she says thank you. You're welcome. So you specifically mentioned tennis and golf and badminton. I don't know if there are other sports that you have worked with.
Yeah.
Uh,
Let's see. So I could talk about that. Can I answer Michael's question about?
yeah, of course. Let
Okay.
me read the question and then
Yeah.
you go ahead.
So
He asked,
Michael,
what
thanks.
recommendations do you have for introducing mindfulness practice into the workplace, ideally starting with the leadership team?
So that's a big question. I think that it depends on what workplace that you're talking about. So certainly if it's a big organization, it could be greatly beneficial for the leadership team. And certainly if you're going to introduce it to the whole group, the whole workforce, you want the leadership team on board. Just like when we've worked with my mindful meditation training and sport intervention, and we found it made a huge difference when the coaches of the teams were engaged. When the coaches of the teams were engaged, there was a high participation and high impact of their athletes. When the coaches were not available and not around, just kind of mandated their athletes show up to the intervention, much less participation and buy-in by the athletes. And I'm guessing it'd be quite similar in the business realm.
And let's do Elizabeth's question because I think it's a follow-up. What is the best basic mindfulness activity to introduce to high school student athletes?
Elizabeth, that's a beautiful question. I think that the biggest thing when you're introducing mindfulness practices to anyone who's not pursuing it for their own reasons, is that you need to make the connection. More importantly than the practice you're offering, you need to make the connection for why does this mindfulness practice, how is this going to help on the court or in the sport, And so I know that when I do the mindful meditation training and sport program and I work with others to teach it, the most important thing is offering examples. So for example, you might say, like, here's the meditation cycle, and say we're going to do a walking meditation. Maybe we have to your choice for the athletes. And I would like you to notice that with the meditation practice, what will happen is, as I described, your mind will wander. And that's the same thing as like being, let's say a basketball player who makes a mistake or misses a key shot and is really embarrassed. That's the same thing as mind wandering in meditation. And so in the meditation practice, you're able to work with your mind and bring your attention back where you want to put your attention, like on the breath, the walking meditation, whatever it is. That will help you on the basketball court when you get really frustrated and angry and just want to shut down and quit. You'll know that's like mind wandering. Your mind's wandering away from what you should be paying attention to for performance. And so more than just the meditation practice, I would just do anything that you personally feel like you could do competently, that you could offer it. But making the connection, whatever you're doing, to how this maps on specifically to that kid's sport life in practice or competition, that's what makes the big difference.
Thank you. All right, the questions are coming in fast and furious. Bill has a couple of questions. Let's combine them. If you diminish daydreaming by mindfulness, is this healthy? And with diminished daydreaming, would creativity be modulated?
Okay.
Sounds like a tough one.
If you diminish do you diminish daydreaming by mindfulness, and is this healthy? So,
yes.
So Bill, I'm guessing that you're suggesting that, and I wish we could be chatting here, that daydreaming can be good, and I would say that daydreaming can be good, and it.
Could it affect creativity? I think was sort of his follow-up question.
I mean, I do believe that when you are fully mindful, in some ways, it's almost like it's a present, maybe like it's almost like a merge between the presence of you're being fully aware, but you're not like in your thinking mind. You're in your present mind, and I think that I know I'm a potter right now, and so I know that for myself, my mind goes quiet, and I engage with the glaze and the dirt and all. That it's the creativity goes up by being fully present with what's there. So I don't see it as a problem. And it matter of fact, if you look at Ellen Langer's work, much of her work is on mindfulness and creativity. So there's a lot of thought that mindfulness helps with creativity, and that doesn't get in the way of it.
Clarabelle is asking if mindfulness is it the same as motivational interviewing?
No, no. It's a,
No.
I would it's a great question. I see that mindfulness can be a part of motivational interviewing. So when you're being mindful and present to what's arising in your discussion with the client, that would be important to bring with your motivational interviewing skills. But I would see it like as a Venn diagram. There's an overlap, but there certainly are distinct concepts.
Cheryl is wondering if a benefit was overlooked on your benefit slide. She's thinking about neuronal enhancement from down regulating that occurs throughout the body, including the brain.
Cheryl, I wish you were here with me. I think I overlooked a lot through all of this because I had to really, it was actually difficult to put this together to offer something that was meaningful to people that maybe were too new to the idea and maybe beneficial to the people who are familiar with the idea. But that's a beautiful catch. And you're right. Yes, we did. I didn't have a chance to talk through that. And I had a few slides on the brain and I just opted not to put it in.
Cheryl is asking if you have recommendations for mindfulness books for elementary school kids.
Wow, that's a great question, Cheryl. I would say the elementary is not my area of expertise, and I would just go to Amazon and do a quick search to see what kind of books are out there for working with kids. There's also a number of programs across the country where they develop mindful interventions for elementary kids. I know there's one here on Cape Cod, so I would also look to see the type of programs that have been developed in addition to particular text.
We have a question from Christina. Hi, Christina. I met Christina at a recent event, so we're glad to have you back.
Okay.
She's a grad student, and she has just finished a survey regarding wellness with their students. And even though they offered numerous mindful and meditation classes, it's not attracting enough students. Do you have any suggestions of how to attract more stressed out students to attend?
Oh, pizza? I don't know. I think that this is the thing. The mindfulness practice, it's hard. It's hard to practice it. I think that maybe showing the benefits, having like maybe a sheet of empirical data that demonstrates how this could be helpful could be something. I think making it short. So I don't know how long the offerings were, but I think that making it too long, it's too difficult for anybody. Maybe pairing it with other stress reduction type of activities, like maybe like they have like therapy dogs. I can imagine something where you can pair it with something that is just like very appealing would be a good idea. Those are just some ideas. Yeah.
Amy, Elizabeth would like to know how she can access MMTS 2.0.
Oh, Elizabeth, thank you so much for that question. It warms my heart. The reason I wrote my new book is just to answer that question. So in MMTS 2.0, I have the entire protocol, which is about 80 pages, and about 250 pages of text that's written in a kind of a trade book friendly manner to explain every idea that I'm offering in MMTS 2.0. And the book comes out with Springer Nature in February, so that's the place to get that.
Great. Chang is asking if you have advice for people deeply depressed and who do not seem to be able to get away from negative thoughts.
Oh, Chang, yeah. Thank you for that. I think what you're asking, I think many people suffer from minor to very significantly with the depressing thoughts. I think the beautiful thing of the mindfulness practice and the mindfulness-based clinical interventions is that the idea that is learning how to, instead of trying to get rid of them, it's maybe learning how to have a different relationship with those thoughts. And so someone with that, I would encourage to go to like a therapist or a program that offers mindfulness-based approaches for people suffering from depression.
Sarah has two questions. How could we use mindfulness with young adults, college freshmen in ESL class? And how could mindfulness be utilized with dealing and managing kids at home, 6 to 9 years old? I know you mentioned a couple things with your own experience.
Yeah. So I'll go one question at a time. So using I'm sorry, the question just disappeared. Can you read it more time, Sarah? The first one, I missed it.
The first question was how you might use mindfulness with ESL students.
Yeah. So thanks for that. So I think that it could be a great way to start a class to help settle people in. So it might be that you just offer like a settling in, maybe a 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 minute meditation practice before the class begins, and offering the rationale that just allowing the class to settle in, so they can get better prepared to bring their attention to the matter at hand. I would encourage that. And then the second question, Sarah, I don't see that one either. It was about with kids 6 to 9.
Yeah, kids at home, ages 6 to 9 specifically.
Oh wow! So again, outside my area of expertise, and I think that with those kids at that age, something that is critically important is modeling. And so, so often the kids learn about how to act and respond based on who their adult mentors and loved ones are. So I would say for the teachers, practicing mindfulness practices themselves. I could say maybe offering classes to the parents. And I think that maybe noticing, pointing out with the kids when they're already being very mindful. Children ages 6 to 9 are quite present and mindful. They get so much engaged in play, art, reading. I think that noticing them and helping them understand, like, there you are, you're being present, you're being creative, you're being connected. This is beautiful for them to see and be encouraged for that type of presence.
That's great. And we have one more question here, unless anyone has 1 or 2 more they want to send in. We have 3 minutes left. Mary Ellen would like to know how many athletes are receptive to mindfulness training. How has your experience been?
Yeah, really interesting. So the mindful meditation training in sport, we have had, female soccer, male and female tennis, badminton, both genders, collegiate golf, male and female, collegiate women's basketball, collegiate men's soccer now, a bunch of athletes that were injured. And it seems to be when people are part of a program, the athletes, maybe I'd say on average, like half are quite interested in the beginning, and then they warm up to it, and so we have been actually, I think my research team has been almost like shocked at the amount of interest the athletes have in the program. I think partly because from the very beginning we make it very we make the connection between the meditation practice to performance directly connected every time, every activity we do. There was one group that we thought the coaches mandated the athletes come, and at the end of the program we found out the coaches had not mandated it, and we had about 90% attendance of about 20 athletes out of 22, 23, something like that. So that was pretty incredible. So they're interested.
We have actually a recommendation here from Lisa. She suggests Yoga for Children by Lisa Flynn is one of many books for families that introduce mindfulness meditation as an approachable practice for children. Thank you, Lisa.
Lisa, yeah, thank you. Beautiful. Thank you for that recommendation.
So we only have 1 minute left. Amy, is there anything that you would like to let everyone know? Anything you'd like to say before I close out?
Just thank you so much for being here and making this possible to do this together. And just remember that mindfulness is not about always things feeling good. It's also about being able to remain in contact with difficulty and maybe choosing to respond differently. So thank you.
Thank you. I really appreciated the message about kindness today. And Cheryl is saying lots of gratitude to Amy. Nick says thank you so much, Dr. B. The thank you messages are flooding in here. Amy, we're so grateful for you taking this time to share your expertise with BU alumni. My thanks also go out to all of our guests for participating today. We understand that you took an hour out of your day to connect with us, so thanks so much for doing that. For more upcoming alumni events, go to bu.edu/alumni/events.
Great.
Thank you all, and I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful day.
Thank you.